Testament reading this morning comes from 1 Samuel chapter 1. Here now, verses 4 through 20. On the day when Elkanah sacrificed, he would give portions to his wife, Peninnah, to all her sons and daughters, but to Hannah he gave a double portion, because he loved her, though the Lord had closed her womb. Her rival used to provoke her severely, to irritate her, because the Lord had closed her womb. So it went on, year by year. As often as she went up to go to the house of the Lord, she used to provoke her. Therefore, Hannah wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah said to her, "Hannah, why do you weep? Why do you not eat? Why is your heart sad? Am I not more to you than 10 sons?" After they had eaten and drunk at Shiloh, Hannah rose and presented herself before the Lord. Now Eli the priest was sitting on the seat beside the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. She was deeply distressed and prayed to the Lord and wept bitterly. She made this vow: "Lord of hosts, if only you will look on the misery of your servant and remember me, and will not forget your servant, but will give to your servant a child, a male child, that I will set him before you as a Nazarite until the day of his death. He shall drink neither wine nor intoxicants, nor shall a razor touch his head." As she continued praying before the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying silently. Only her lips moved, but her voice was not heard. And therefore Eli thought she was drunk. So Eli said to her, "How long will you make a drunken spectacle of yourself? Put away your wine." But Hannah answered, "No, my Lord. I'm a woman deeply troubled. I've drunk neither wine nor strong drink, but I've been pouring out my soul before the Lord. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman, for I have been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation all this time." Then Eli answered, "Go in peace. The God of Israel grant the petition you have made to him." And she said, "Let your servant find favor in your sight." Then the woman went to her quarters, ate and drank with her husband, and her countenance was sad no longer. They rose early in the morning and worshipped before the Lord, then went back to their house at Ramah. Elkanah knew his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. And in due time, Hannah conceived and bore a son. And she named him Samuel, for she said, "I've asked for him of the Lord." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
All right, I'm trying not to be overly picky, but I feel like the blue and the mic are distracting. Can I switch to a handheld? I'm fine? All right. Then it's just me, and I'll try to ignore it. Hannah rose. Hannah was in a position that she didn't feel comfortable, didn't feel was right, didn't feel was within God's will for her life. She was barren and expecting a child and not receiving one. The text, and I know it's a different translation, the text said she had great anxiety and vexation. She was bothered by this. But one day, despite it all, despite being picked on by her sister wife, she stood up. She went to the temple. and she made her petition known to God. The themes this Sunday that sit in both of these texts we've read are in many ways the combination of the themes that I've talked about the last couple of Sundays. So if you were here on Reformation Day, we talked about the fact that the future is going to be different, that the prophets prophesy, and they never seem to prophesy that things are going to stay the same. Always that we're working towards this better world, to this place we imagine, where people who eat sour grapes will have their own teeth turned on edge. That was the image in the scripture. But we're changing, we're going somewhere, where the church reform, always reforming. And then the following week we talked about All Saints. We talked about the raising of Lazarus. We talked about especially the fact that Jesus wept. The fact that along the way things aren't always bright, happy. That there are real things and that crying is okay. Crying is part of it. And then finally last week we talked about love. We talked about the fact that love is the point. And we are often distracted by so many other things and so many other ideas, and really it's all about love. So if you were confused by any of those, just pay attention this week. And if you're confused by this week when you were at some of those, fill in the blanks. Because I might go off the rails just a little bit. I want to kind of take some risks this Sunday. So, in this sermon, Hannah desperately wants a child. And the process for her is longer than expected. And it's harder than expected. It involves more pain, but eventually it all works out all right. And I relate to Hannah. I see what she's going through. I've, of course, never been an infertile woman, right? I've never struggled with a fertility problem directly, but I felt that way. Like the thing I've expected is too long in coming, and I'm not sure I can bear it anymore. And I think some of you all might relate to Hannah this morning. And so, what I do is, when I read the scriptures, is I imagine how I'm feeling, and I imagine how Hannah must be feeling. That helps the scriptures come alive to me. It is if I relate some of my own experiences that have to do with the characters in the text becomes more exciting and more interesting, and it applies more to my life. And I think what the text is saying to me this morning, and what it might be saying to you if you've ever related to Hannah, is that yes, it is hard, and it has been long in coming, and I, God, notice that, but very soon, it's going to change. It takes a while, and it's taken a while, but I hear you, and I'm there when you ask me. So I've just had a really hard time this last couple of months. In my life, in my work, my free time, in my marriage, it's just been hard. And I've not felt like I'm in tracking, you know? Sometimes I feel like I make sense to myself, and sometimes I feel like I'm off. And these last couple months, I just felt off. It felt like I'm not doing everything I'm supposed to be, like I'm not being the person I'm supposed to be. And one of the most central pieces of that, one of the biggest, most painful elements that I've been walking through is just that I haven't been making friends. This is where I say I might go off the rails, because it's a little weird for me to share this with you, right? There's always a line. I think that it's good for pastors to be vulnerable demonstrate Christ-likeness by like sharing areas of weakness as well as strength, or maybe even more than strength. I think often the weakness is more helpful, but I also don't want to put myself in a position where you feel like you have to give me pastoral care. So I'm pushing it by talking about things that are more fresh. But I want to push it a little bit, because since I moved to Orlando, I've had a hard time connecting with people that I can just share my life with. And it's not that you people don't count, but you people don't count. Like there's an element in which you have to have people with you who are not associated with your family or your workplace. Because you have to have people with you who you can complain about your family and your workplace to. Right? And I've just had a hard time with that. And what starts happening when you have a hard time with something is you start blaming yourself, right? Because that's the one thing all your failures have in common. It's you. And you start to wonder, is it me? Is it Orlando? Do people not make friends in Orlando? What's happening? And I think the largest part of it is just that it's not as easy to make friends when you're an adult as when you're in your 20s or when you're in college. And I stayed in college into my 30s. And then I started this kind of bizarre job that people don't really know how to relate with. You know, you talk to someone on the street and you're like, oh yeah, what do you do? I'm an insurance adjuster. What do you do? I'm a pastor. And they're like, oh, stop cursing. I'm so sorry for everything I am. And so it's just been, it's been a stress for me, and it's prevented a release of stress in some other areas. I think, so I made it a priority is what I've done. These last couple of weeks after I got back from vacation, I said, I really, because I feel like it's a confession in a way to share this with you, to say like, I believe every Christian needs to have someone who's pouring into them and someone who they're pouring into, right? They need to have mentors in place, and they need to have disciples really in place. And so if I say I don't have this social circle, I'm saying I've failed in some serious ways as a Christian. I'm admitting that. And so if I'm going to admit that, I need to take action about that, right? And so I've been taking action. And that makes me relate to this portion of the story where Hannah is praying. Hannah is doing her work before God. She's on her knees, and she's in the Spirit, and she's engaged in this problem. And Eli, the priest, says, "Are you drunk?" And I gotta wonder how many people suspected that I've been drunk in the past couple of weeks. At one point, I was looking. I'm trying to create like a clergy fellowship group. That's one angle, right? One of the kind of angles of attack that I'm working on. And so I called up the district area of the United Methodists. Because, they have, just like we have a presbytery, they have a district. And I was like, yeah, can I get like a list of all the pastors' email addresses in the Orlando area? And they're like, well, who are you? And I'm like, I'm a Presbyterian. And they're like, you're not a Methodist? No. And they're like, what's wrong with you? At one point, I literally had to leave a work meeting. I had to leave a meeting at this church so that I could go to a bar, because I'd made prior commitments with people I could make friends with who were meeting in a bar. And I don't drink, but you gotta wonder when the pastor does that, right? They seem drunk. What is he thinking? Yeah, exactly, Miles. So, I relate to Hannah. Hannah wanted a baby. That was her goal. That was her pain. That was where her life was leading. And I I wanted some friends outside of the church, and both of our struggles took a while. And I think that's where the message of hope shows up. Right? In the while that it took. You know, when I read the Bible and I see these stories of people who are struggling, when I see these stories sometimes of failure, it's really more encouraging to me. Versus when I see the encouraging stories, right? When I read like Joshua, and it's like, and they took their 30 swords and they struck down 400,000 men. I'm a little bit like, yeah, can't relate, sorry. But in moments like this, where Hannah wanted something so simple, wanted something that she had always dreamed of, and it just took a while, it reminds me that I'm not broken after all. It tells me, and there's great grace from God in the message it gives me that I think it can give you, that taking a while, hurting more than you expect, is to be expected. It doesn't mean that you're not doing it right. It means that you are in the pipeline. And the pipeline has an end to it. So what I want to do is I want to do a little experiment, if you would. And I have a list here. But because I think there might be people who are going through this, I think it would help if you could give a demonstration for them. So if you are a person who's a testimony to this, if you've got a story in the past, like Hannah's story now, where you have done something hard and it's worked out all right, would you stand up? Would you stand up if you are a person, for instance, who's ever started a business? If you've done something that matters, or if you've ever made a person, would you stand up? If you and a spouse have ever made a person and just out of yourselves, because that's something I've never done, and I think that matters. Would you stand up for that? That's a good example. If you've ever fought and challenged an injustice, if there's something in the world that you've seen and you said, that's wrong, would you stand up? If you've overcome a terrible sickness, if you've ever been in a place where you thought you were going to die and then you didn't die, would you stand up? If you've started something that's endured, or accomplished something that you weren't really sure was possible, go ahead and stand up. Okay, look around the room. Even if you're standing up, look at each other. Look at how many you are. Okay. Now, remain standing if it was easy. If it went according to plan, remain standing. If it came at a convenient time in your life, and if it didn't hurt. It's a lot fewer stands. Do you see this? The rest of you can sit down now. That means that you're okay. The story, the testimony of history that repeats over and over is one that matches yours. It's one that you can relate to. You're not broken. Actually, that's just what having a baby looks like. It hurts to have a baby. The metaphor of childbirth, it's used over and over in Scripture. It's used in Hannah, but it's consistently used. I mean, God relates Zion to a mother who is in labor. And it's even in Mark. You know, in Mark, the readers of Mark, who would have been reading Mark at the end of the first century, their biggest anxiety, the biggest worry, would have been the fact that it seems to them God is broken. And why do they think God is broken? Well, because the way they have always worshipped God in the past, the way God has always met them, the place that they've always had to engage with the mighty Lord has been the great temple in Jerusalem. They always used to be able to go there and see the majestic buildings and know how great God was. God would meet them there, he promised. In the great temple in Jerusalem, by the time the readers of Mark are able to read it, it's gone. It's leveled to the ground. And so Mark provides this great assurance to the people that are reading his gospel by reminding them of Jesus' words, saying, "Not one stone will stand upon another." The times are changing, and the changes, they're going to be hard. There's going to be wars and rumors of wars. Nation will rise up against nation, but you know what that is? It's the birth pangs. It's a natural process that leads us into new life. And I'm building new life for us, baby. Jesus didn't really say baby, at least as far as I know. And I think, if I can add just one more scripture in today, I think that's what's going on in Genesis chapter 3. You know Genesis chapter 3? Adam and Eve eat the apple. Do you know this one, Madison? You acted this one out. You know Genesis chapter 3? And they eat the apple, and then afterwards, God says, "Oh, no. You're going to have great pain in childbirth, and Eve and Adam, you're going to toil, and you're going to try to make the land bring forth fruit, and you're not going to be able to." And for a long time, I read that as like a curse, like a spell, right? Like the kind of curse they have in Lord of the Rings, like God just made those things harder. But you know what I'm starting to think is more what's going on is this stuff. I think God would have stood up. Right? God, when we did that experiment, God made a thing. He did something that mattered. And then the thing that he made, the creation, the world, the pinnacle of it, the man and the woman, they broke his heart. You ever make a child and they break your heart? And he, at that moment, when he was grieving that loss, celebrating the good thing that he made, but grieving that loss, he said, you are going to feel this too. Women, you're gonna create babies. And it's gonna be so good. And it's gonna be so painful. And men, you're gonna try to do work. You're gonna try to accomplish something, and you're gonna try to make money, and it's gonna be so good. And it's gonna be so painful. To do something that matters with your life, it's gonna be hard in the midst of the good. And by the way, I think those gender roles are not, they don't need to be so cleanly divided, right? Men experience the pain of parenting, and women experience the pain of career just as much, right? But the association that wherever you are in life, in whatever kind of way you're leading, that there is this process. The text today encourages me because of the conclusion it draws. Because Hannah, before the priest says, "Don't look down upon your servant for this," and the priest says, "You're right. May the Lord bless you," and the Lord remembered Hannah. And she gave birth. And she received a son, and she dedicated him to the work in the temple. It turned out that God wasn't just dragging his feet to make it a hard time for Hannah, but he was preparing Hannah for such a time as this. God's timing is not our timing. Eli was losing his faith. If you read the book of Samuel, he's making compromises. He's given the best jobs to his family. He's not the leader that Israel needs, and we need someone who's not from the house of Eli, who's going to be dedicated to the house of the Lord. And Hannah, you are going to give birth to that child, to Samuel. It turns out that God had a plan all along. You weren't broken, and it's going to work. So I'm happy to relate to you today that in the past week I've been able to join 2 new groups that I'm excited about, where there are people that make sense to me, that I seem to make sense to. Just last Thursday, I feel like I made 6 new friends after a year of goose egg. And that it works, and that there's a process, and if you're there, and you're in that process, that you're allowed to feel it, that the tension is real and it's honest, and you can share it and you can pray to God about it. But I think that if I can trust myself to be representing God honestly this morning, I think God's word to you is soon. Soon. So with that, let's join together and let's respond to the God who gives us the good gifts. Let's respond to the God to whom we have testimony, who has brought us through so many valleys of the shadow of death before, by singing together.